Hello there, music lovers. Thank you so much for dropping by this channel and for subscribing and for commenting and for giving these on videos. And even if you give this on a video, that's all right too. And I got a request from a subscriber who wanted me to do a video about the Big Generator album. I figured I would expand it and talk more generally about Trevor Rabin and his little time with the band. I wasn't so little, actually. He was with them for about 15 years maybe, and you know, made some pretty decent music. It's not the same as what Yes was doing in the 70s, but it does have its merits. Trevor Rabin came along at a time when Yes were dead, and he really wasn't joining Yes. That wasn't the point. It was to join a band with Chris Squire and Alan White, who were just basically looking for somebody to work with. I mean, they had just finished working with Jimmy Page. They had a band that they were going to call XYZ, called, you know, Yes Zeppelin, which I think is a pretty cool little name. There's some demos of that period that came out. I'll try to put a link to that below. That folded. So they got together with Trevor Rabin, and they put out one of the most popular albums. I mean, they had a huge smash with the 90125 album, #1 hit with Owner of a Lonely Heart. And it's pretty interesting to hear how that song evolved. If you listen to the demo that Trevor Rabin brought into the band, which I'll put a link to, you know, it was pretty horrible, except the chorus was something that producer Trevor Horn heard and thought that was a major hit, just had to build a song around it. And to make a long story short, John Anderson got involved, and he put on his own spin with his own lyrics, and you have what I would consider to be a masterful hit single with Owner. And John Anderson talks about this in an interview that I had with him, which I posted. I'll put a link up for that, and he talks about how he came into the fold during this time. So anyway, the 90125 album, yeah, it was definitely different than what Yes had done in the 70s, but I thought that it was a great, concise, pop-oriented album. It does have some echoes of prog, especially a song like Changes, which I thought was, you know, one of the best songs that they did during the Rabin era. I mean, I like Changes. You can lump it in with a lot of songs from the 70s. I think it's an important song, and I really do like it. The album also has like Hold On, It Can Happen is great, Leave It is really cool, like 90 vocal tracks on that. It's a shame that they can't play it live, you know, because that's a hit, and they can't really do it because it's just so much production on it. Hearts is another great song from that album. Would like to see that live too with ARW. 90125, to me, that was my gateway into Yes. And I'm kind of curious to hear from some fans of the band in the 70s, to hear what they thought about Yes coming back in the 80s without Hal. You know, and kind of what your impressions were. I don't really have that kind of context to really offer up. But I know that 90125 brought me into the fold, and then once I went backwards and started listening to those classic albums like the Yes album and Fragile, and especially Close to the Edge, I was blown away. I mean, I love that stuff much, much more, but 90125 I could really appreciate. The Big Generator album, you know, it took a number of years for that to get off the ground, because you had John Anderson now as a songwriter, and he was kind of butting heads with Trevor Rabin. You know, Anderson's a very cosmic, kind of, you know, hard to nail him down. Trevor Rabin was much more of a, you know, taskmaster, has to be done a certain kind of way. Didn't really work with John Anderson. That album, to me, was a bit of a letdown. It's got its moments. Rhythm of Love, Shoot High, Aim Low is great. I like Finalize. I like Love Will Find a Way. Holy Lamb is a really cool song. That's probably the most 70s-like song on that album. But overall, I think it suffers from a bit too much noodling and too much production work. Trevor Horn even left during the album because it was just too much going on. And so that album kind of sparked a lot of frustrations within the band, so much so that John Anderson wound up after that forming a band with Steve Howe and Rick Wakeman and Bruford, the Anderson Bruford Wakeman Howe album, and Trevor Rabin was doing some work with Chris Squire. That's how the Union thing kind of came about. Anderson Bruford Wakeman Howe was about to work on their second album, and they were looking for some more songs. Anderson asked Rabin if he had some songs, and Rabin did have a few, and they wound up merging these two projects that were kind of going on. There actually were about 3 different projects going on at this time, and they brought them all under this album, Union. And Union really is a Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe album. It's really their second album with some Trevor Rabin stuff thrown in. And, you know, they got Chris Squire to sing on all the songs, to do background vocals, and John Anderson is singing vocals on everything to kind of keep it as a cohesive album. But, you know, in terms of what Trevor Rabin brought to that album, there were only 3 songs on there that were Trevor songs. Lift Me Up, which I thought was really cool. Miracle of Life, which I also like. Would love to see ARW pull that out. And then there was Saving My Heart, which is kind of a real poppy love song. Not too crazy about that song. After the Union thing kind of ended, there was, you know, a lot of speculation as to, you know, who was going to be in Yes going forward, because we had all of the band members on that Union tour, and then who was going to be on the next Yes album. Trevor Rabin wanted to work with Rick Wakeman, but the record label insisted on the 90125 era lineup doing another album. So we wound up with an album called Talk, and that album featured the 90125 lineup, and it really was an album that was a John Anderson, Trevor Rabin album. They wrote most of the songs. Trevor Rabin was really in control of the production. You know, I'm really not crazy about this album. I know that there's a lot of fans out there that do like it, but to me, it just didn't sound like a full band experience. That's my biggest problem, because I think when Yes is really, really working well, everybody is kind of adding bits and pieces, and you can really hear that it's a band effort. This album, to me, doesn't sound like a band effort. And I heard of Trevor Rabin playing bass guitar on some stuff, playing keyboards on some stuff, and to me, that's just not the way that Yes works. I don't like the album cover either. I think it stinks. Not that that makes an album good or bad, but I'm just saying, to me, I didn't like that. I didn't like the way it sounded. You know, like The Calling is a pretty cool song, but Alan White sounds like he's banging on plastic tubs. I just don't like some of the sounds going on there. I think Yes has done much, much better. And that ended the Trevor Rabin era. After that album kind of came and tanked, he was like, you know what, I'm going to go do film scores, which he had already started doing. There was even some film stuff in the Endless Dream track, which was kind of like Trevor's Close to the Edge on that Talk album. This big, long song that closed the album. I think it's got some great, great moments, especially early on, but I think it just goes on way too long. And, you know, that album just did not do well for them. And that's when Trevor Rabin said, you know what, I'm going to go do films. And that was it. We hadn't heard from Trevor since, until he just came back into the fold. Now he's out on tour with John Anderson and Rick Wakeman, who he finally gets to work with, and they're working on some new stuff. So we're going to get some new Trevor Rabin, John Anderson, Wakeman stuff coming up probably in the next 6 months or so, and looking forward to that. You know, I think that Trevor Rabin is going to bring a cinematic kind of quality to these new songs. At least that's what I would think, since that's where he's been. And we'll see. We shall see. So what do you think? Let me know what you think about the Trevor Rabin era of Yes. What do you think about these albums that he did with them? What do you think, you know, like, what are your favorite songs from this era? And, you know, let me know what you thought about Trevor joining Yes, if you were a fan in the 70s. All right, put it down below. Be sure to comment. Be sure to subscribe, and thank you for coming along, and I'll talk to you later.